What's up, Bitcoiners? Studio for today is a little not the sunrise we're used to. Right? We didn't get the exact place we thought we were going to get, but we're going to do our best. We're going to do our best. My family's happy. We got in okay yesterday, right? And I checked, even though the sunrise that we have in the video today is not as good as we're used to, the sun still came up, and I can confirm Bitcoin is running. Nothing else to do but have a coffee and talk about the news. What a newsy day. So much going on, right? So much going on. Morning, Justin. Now, it's Christmas time, and I know Greta isn't, she's not happy in general, right? She's got some happiness problems, and we want Greta to be happy. We really do, right? We don't like seeing unhappy people. And Greta, they had all of Europe tried. They changed their energy policies. They did their best to make the teenage girl who's not a teenager anymore happy. But it didn't work out. And so I wonder, as we come to Christmas, we find out now that because of the European decisions they've made about energy, it turns out that the world's coal consumption is higher than it's ever been, right? It's the highest it's ever been. And everyone's saying it's because of the energy crisis in Europe, right? And Europe buying up all the liquid natural gas around the world, other countries that have a bit of extra liquid natural gas, like India, saying, oh, we'll go with coal, right? We'll go with coal, no problem. We'll sell the high-priced liquid natural gas to the Europeans so Greta doesn't get upset. But in the end, I know it's Christmas, and what they say, if you're naughty, I don't know if she's old enough to still have the Santa and the presents and naughty and nice list. I don't really know how old she is. Some people say she's really young, and that's why we can't criticize her. But other people say she's older. So let's just say she's somewhere in the middle, still unhappy. And now she's on the naughty list. She got the coal for Christmas. She got the coal. It didn't work out for her, right? Poor Greta. I mean, do you really think she's going to have a happy Christmas? I don't know. I don't think so, right? I think Christmas is not a good time for her. I wish it were. I really want her to be happy. I do. I'm not kidding. Did you see this? All the news going on in the world about FBI and the CIA. And, on this show, one of our main stories is how it doesn't get covered, the Twitter files, by the mainstream. We predicted it, right? So it's not even, oh, look at them not covering it. They're so stupid, right? No, that's not what we said. We said at the start that because so much of this is so monumental that it would change people's worldview, therefore they have to ignore it. They can't look it straight in the eye. It's too much for the mind almost. And so some things like Reason Magazine, right? Reason Magazine, they're using all their mental faculties. They're so smart, right? So reasonable. Full of atheists, I bet, right? Because they know the truth. They know it. Be careful, right? They know it, right? They put their mind to it. They did their own research. They didn't find God. So Reason Magazine, everything going on in the world about FBI, they managed to write an article today about the FBI as an institution, right? They finally got around all this news, what's going on with the FBI. They finally managed to write a story about it. But it's really about remote work and whether or not they'll get a new building. So that's what Reason says. Well, instead of spending billions on a new building, FBI, you guys should just embrace remote work. Come on, go work at Twitter. Go work at these other places, right? So if ever there was a great contrast about what mainstream media, even things like Reason Magazine, right? Why they can't cover what's in the news, why they can't catch up to what's in the news, why they can't intellectualize what happens. I mean, some of it's too big, right? Some of it's so monumental. I think that's why we, come here in the morning. And I think in general, we've been sometimes a week ahead of the news cycle, days ahead of the news cycle regularly, usually on top of everything. And you hear it here, and then you'll see it percolate in the news a few days later. One of those examples is the show that I did the other day on LBJ, right? I said LBJ, and that had come from people talking about JFK, and now everyone's talking about JFK all the time and what's going on with that. And yesterday, Doomberg, who also hosted the debate between Michael Saylor and George Gammon the other day is a great writer. Just 1 second. Pardon, everyone. Children playing in the next room. Just have to tell them I can't hear. So Doomberg hosted the debate between Michael Saylor and George Gammon the other day. But coincidentally, he wrote a piece today about LBJ, right? Who we were talking about the other day, an LBJ piece related to Bitcoin. So I was the first that you heard relate the LBJ situation and the JFK to Bitcoin last week. Doomberg today in his Substack writes, so I read this years ago, the Robert Caro's 4-volume biography of Lyndon Johnson, and that's The Passage of Power, Master of the Senate. Basically, it's a 4-book process of his whole career. And here's what he underlines. He says, and it, very well chronicled, 3,000 pages, details everything you need, right? And there's one overarching, inescapable conclusion drawn from its pages. Johnson was a grotesquely corrupt person willing to say and do anything to accumulate power and to enrich himself. So here they talk about how he was elected to Congress in his 20s. He was only ever a congressman, right? That's his only job in life. He was known for handing out literal bags of cash to politicians. This is a little side story too. If you didn't hear it, Doomberg doesn't mention it, but I'll mention just the kind of person he was. When he was president, he would force his staff. So this is vulgar. So get ready. This is vulgar. He would take poo. He would poo, right, and whisper with the door open, and it would force his staff to come closer and closer to smell the poo. Apparently, he was well endowed, right, big time, and would end arguments with civil society by pulling his pants down and putting it on the table. This is the kind of guy we're dealing with, right? For real. I mean, those are confirmed hearsay coming from me because I wasn't there, but these are confirmed stories corroborated by many people. The poo one, the pulling his pants down and showing it one. This is who we're dealing with, right? This is what he did. So here's what they say. And this is his corruption. So how he would joke about how he stole his first congressional win, that he won by just a few votes, but because 202 votes came at the last minute, but they were in alphabetical order. Johnson proudly mocked anyone who accused him of being dishonest, openly referred to himself as Landslide Lyndon, and continued from there to push his way through power. When he was elected to Congress, he was dirt poor, right? And remained, that's all he ever did, was stay in elected politics. So from the 1940s, dirt poor, to when he finally left, 1969, when his presidency ended. So uninterrupted, unbroken string spanning 3 decades, he managed to retire with over $100 million. And his official explanation was that his wife, Lady Bird, grew a small radio station and had some affiliates and managed to make money, right? And the way Doomberg sort of concludes here is he says, what separates Johnson's story from other tales of political venality is the vast impact of his legacy. The average U.S. citizen's trust in government peaked at 77% during Johnson's time as president and drifted lower ever since, sitting at 20% today. He also uncorked an orgy of government spending, both in support of the war in Vietnam, which he started with Jim Morrison's dad, of all people, right? MK Ultra. Jim Morrison being the singer of The Doors. The Doors, getting the name from an Aldous Huxley title of a book, The Doors of Perception. So he also uncorked an orgy of government spending, both in support of the war in Vietnam and in pursuit of his ambitious domestic agenda. Bigger government means bigger opportunities for grift, and Washington, D.C.'s insatiable and bipartisan appetite for both was irreversibly accelerated by Johnson. Measured as a percentage of gross domestic product, U.S. federal government has nearly doubled since the 1960s. Normalization of behavior like Johnson's has led to a continuing debasement of US politics to the point where scandals that would have previously ended careers are now routinely blown off as standard operating procedure. Today, members of Congress openly and flagrantly trade stocks based on inside information, have gone so far as to carve out an exemption that legalizes an activity that is still crime for the rest of us. So that's the insider trading. Government regulators routinely end up as well-compensated employees of the very companies they are meant to oversee, creating giant and obvious conflicts of interest in the process, which we've seen recently with the Twitter files and the FBI folks going over to Twitter. And selective use of the powers of government against political opponents is now commonplace. An entire cottage industry of rent-seeking enablers, lobbyists, attorneys, all these kinds of folks, right? So here's what he ends up doing. As the cancer of corruption grows, so too does the government's need to corral the outrage and the activities of ordinary citizens. In this regard, one weapon supersedes them all: the ability to control how ordinary citizens transact in the economy. As Ben Hunt brilliantly described in his excellent piece in praise of Bitcoin, that's Epsilon Theory, who we mention regularly here. Remember, here's the other good thing. These are all the sources we mention all the time. So I'm not introducing new people. I mean, we talk about Doomberg all the time. We talk about Ben Hunt all the time, right? In praise of Bitcoin, the goal of the US government is to see and preside over all the money in the world, because once that power is obtained, it's game over. Hence a key passage. So this is what he's talking about here. This is the Ben Hunt Epsilon 3 piece. That's really all it is. That's what anti-money laundering regulations are all about. That's what know your client regulations are all about. That's what report of foreign bank and financial accounts regulations are all about. That's what the Treasury-led Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications, SWIFT, is all about. That's what the Bank Secrecy Act is all about. None of these programs are really about taxes. None of these programs are really about catching crooks or fighting terrorists. All of these programs are really about information for information's sake, regarding the greatest source of power in the world and the raison d'etre of every government on earth: money. Buried in the noise and drama, so this is back to Doomberg. Buried in the noise and drama surrounding the ongoing collapse of the crypto sector are disturbing developments in tangentially related technologies. So he goes into CBDCs here, right? But let's just go back to the LBJ piece, right? The LBJ piece. What we said here was that basically LBJ killed Kennedy, right? And we're starting to see more and more that it probably is the case. Roger Stone, again, the person who was arrested during the Trump files, during the Trump-Russia collusion thing, right? Remember, the FBI tipped off CNN, so they had not just a perp shot, they had like a movie or television raid, live cameras there to see the FBI raid him and pull him out in a perp walk. I mean, that was all staged, right? I mean, how often does the FBI tip off only CNN? Only CNN. It wasn't all the news cameras or whatever. One news camera, one crew there covered it live that Roger Stone was arrested during that whole ordeal. And of course, he still has troubles and people are still complaining about him. But he is the global expert on Nixon. Nixon believed LBJ did it, right? Nixon believed LBJ did it. And he wrote a book about how it happened. And that's not what Doomberg is saying here, right? And I don't have proof other than what I've read and what people have said. And the story that makes sense is, why do you go become the vice president when you were the master of the Senate, right? That was his colloquial title, the master of the Senate, because any legislation had to go through him. That's why he became vice president. He went and took that role because he had enough power that people had to support him and the Kennedys needed him. So when he became president, he already had control of Congress and all those things. And now that we know the other part, which is the Roger Stone piece, that Robert F. Kennedy hated LBJ and wanted to destroy him, and John F. Kennedy was ready to participate. So they had multiple investigations going, and all of that was in the mainstream news just before Kennedy was shot. And where was Kennedy shot? I mean, where LBJ comes from, right? He was shot in the state that LBJ controlled, right? So all the people that were there have a connection to LBJ and could easily have been influenced by the guy who would take shits and make you come in the room and smell them, right? This is the guy we're dealing with. So the LBJ story the JFK story now out there, and it looks like people are isolating that as the time when the coup actually happened in America. And again, our frame for Bitcoin and World War III is not nations versus nations, right? It's nations and the brainwashing that they've inflicted on the people, and how those people have to overcome it. That's why we call this show The Breakup. It's literally why we call it The Breakup, right? It's about ending a relationship with a thing you thought was real and actually isn't. There is plenty of room psychologically for patriotism for America. But that patriotism isn't from the institutions that we have today. It's from the people who try to live up to those institutions. Even Yoel Roth, right? Yoel Roth, in some ways, I mean, I don't know the whole story there, right? I don't know the whole story there, but it looks like he got psyops. I could be wrong. I haven't followed everything about Yoel Roth. I just see what's in the Twitter files, and I see what's going on, right? And even the way some people have been led to be so angry about Yoel Roth. I mean, you're entitled to be angry about the guy. I just still don't see a crime, nor do I see a crime with Jack Dorsey. These were people who were lied to. They're the same as the J6 people, as far as I can tell, right? These are victims of psyops. And from today on, I think there's less of an excuse to be a victim of a psyop. Like if, 5 years ago, if the FBI would have come to me and said, we're really worried about this stuff and we got, you got to help us because if you don't, we're in trouble, I would have taken them seriously. I would have. Okay, yeah, I want to help, right? Russian disinformation, right? But already, 5 years in my case probably is too soon, because I could see what was happening to Trump in real time and had a pretty good idea of what was going on. But not everyone has learned about Bitcoin. Not everyone has seen around the corner, let's say. And folks like Yoel Roth were easy prey. And that's what these folks look for anyway. They look for impressionable people. They make their targets based on those qualities, people who want to make you happy, who want you to fit in, who themselves want to fit in. We're going to talk more about psychological warfare and 5G warfare in a minute. But now put all of that stuff about LBJ in context, the spending, the controls, the psyops. You see Twitter files 8 dropped yesterday. Li Feng, again, another person we have talked about here for the FTX scandal. He was somewhat involved. And here he is he's the newest name. So we've seen Barry Weiss, Michael Schellenberger had a couple, and what's his name? The fellow who used to be at Rolling Stone, Matt Taibbi. So Li Feng, first time out. And what do the Twitter Files 8 really talk about? Well, it is all about these influence campaigns. It's all about psyops. It actually underlines how some of this stuff was technically even under psyops envelope. And that's the CENTCOM, right? CENTCOM is the U.S. Central Command, which helps organize these psyops. And one of the smoking guns he came up with in these about the online psyop campaign, and this is how Li Feng actually even titled his whole Twitter Files 8, how Twitter quietly aided the Pentagon's covert online psyop campaign. Despite promises to shut down covert state-run propaganda networks, Twitter docs show that the social media giant directly assisted the U.S. military's influence operations. Twitter has claimed for years that they make concerted efforts to detect and thwart government-backed platform manipulation. This is them testifying to Congress, he underlines. But the ones he ends up underlining are pretty amazing. And it is the stories about Yemen, right? How much disinformation has gone in about Yemen. The CENTCOM accounts on the list tweeted frequently about U.S. military priorities in the Middle East, including promoting anti-Iran messages, promotion of the Saudi Arabia U.S.-backed war in Yemen, and accurate U.S. drone strikes that claimed to only hit terrorists. So in the end, this stuff becomes pretty damning. Elon Musk says, yikes, right? The conduct with the U.S. military's covert network stands in stark contrast with how Twitter has boasted about rapidly identifying and taking down covert accounts tied to state-backed influence operations, including Thailand, Russia, Venezuela, and others since 2016. The difference is they hadn't yet marked U.S. institutions as potential enemy actors. And a lot of that had to do, again, with the Obama change on the prohibition of using psychological warfare on American people. Remember, we talked about that a few weeks ago, saying, oh, they said it was just about running radio-free Europe in America at higher quality. Of course not, right? It was stuff like this. Of course it was stuff like this, because otherwise that would be illegal. And then, tie it right back to the LBJ statement. Why do you do all this stuff in the end, right? You are, as Doomberg argues, right? You need to basically, you need to control the outrage that comes as a reaction to the corruption, right? You need to do that, right? Like he says, right, the cancer of corruption grows, so does the government's need to corral the outrage and the activities of ordinary citizens, which is why all this Bank Secrecy Act stuff started. All of that came from that era. And because it is about that, you've got to control the information, you've got to control who's being incentivized to do what. So we see it in action with the Twitter files, particularly in Twitter files 8, but we saw it in action yesterday, the $1.7 trillion omnibus bill that is supposed to be voted on in one day. And it's 1 million pages, right? Absolutely no one can read it. There's some people who have tried to take a look at it, right? Representative Dan Bishop. This is him just picking things out and being like, what is going on here, right? It allocates $410 million to the border security of Jordan, Lebanon, Egypt, Tunisia, and Oman. Nothing for American border security. And what is given for American border security for CPB funding, which is the Customs and Border Control, can't be used to improve border security. It's just for maintaining operations. Explicitly says it can't. There's $65 million to study salmon. There's something he said, I know. I'm just going through the list here. Oh yeah, this one's great. There's $575 million for family planning in areas where population growth threatens biodiversity. What does that even mean? Like, what? You're not allowed to have a lot of kids where it's beautiful or something, and there's a lot of animals. I don't understand. Family planning, of course, has been a colloquialism for abortion for a very long time in America. So there you go. Now, all of this stuff about the $1.7 trillion bill in the end is an affront to America in general, right? A $1.7 trillion bill is roughly, 5% already of the global debt, of American debt added to it, 5% in 1 year, like the whole accumulation, right? This is a massive spending bill with huge implications, right? Meanwhile, what you've got is folks talking about what Trump did again, right? It's not the $1.7 trillion bill. Right now, the big story on Quartz this morning, not the $1.7 trillion bill. Quartz is really concerned about the IRS never doing a great job on Trump's tax returns from 2016. Right now, the tax return story, I always lumped in with like Hillary's emails or the Mar-a-Lago thing. It's all document control stories, right? Document control. There's nothing more to it than who should have said what when. You can't really infer the type of intentions required to have a real criminal case there. I always said that about Hillary Clinton. I said, well, I mean, it looks bad, but I mean, really, in the end, you can get away from this. This is a subordinate's job to get this right, in a sense. And if they didn't, it's not really going to go up to the top person. And Trump's case would be one of those. I mean, how many lawyers are involved in his taxes, right? Like, how many people have seen it? How many people are cajoling and maneuvering and doing what we should all be doing, right? We should all be playing the game aggressively with the IRS. And I've always admired Trump's aggressiveness towards the IRS. It's something we should all follow. We should never listen to these people so innocently and easily, because they end up spending money on the dumbest shit ever since LBJ, right? LBJ started this. Here's another one, the same author, Ananya Bhattacharya, pardon me if I got the name wrong. She wrote both of these articles, right? This is both her. This is the IRS on stupid IRS. She says they screwed up Trump's tax returns. half-baked job, they said. And the other story she's got, and these are the two top stories if you get the newsletter from Quartz, if you go on Quartz today, Musk couldn't fix Twitter in 2 months. So now he's making it look like no one can, right? Because this is the thing he said, I'm going to run a poll, I'm going to leave. He's going to leave. And this was obviously done for marketing. He had a plan to leave. He was always going to step down, right? We know that. The plan was always he was going to step down. He was never going to be the CEO of Twitter for a long time. He was only going to be the CEO of Twitter for an interim period, and eventually he was going to choose someone else. That was never not that scenario. So this is just him, and he can still delay it. He can still say, oh, I'm looking for the person now. I am going to step down. He was always stepping down, right? So the poll was a marketing trick, a really good one, because everyone's like, oh, what's he doing, right? But of course, Quartz can't intellectualize that. And the whole article here is about keeping Twitter alive, but Musk is making it sound like it's the worst. The Twitter CEO is the worst job in the world, right? That's what they're going with today. $1.7 trillion bill. Twitter files 8. Proof of PSYOP deployment on the American people at scale. And the number 1 and 2 stories are the IRS and Trump and Elon Musk's failures. So Elon Musk even weighed in on this, right? What do we do with a $1.7 trillion omnibus bill? He says, I'm in favor of small spending bill to keep things running, but common sense suggests that it will be the least amount required through the holidays, railroading through a giant spending bill that almost no one has read and is unlikely to be in the best interests of the people, right? You can even see what Musk is going through as a person, right? Ben Hunt, who we mentioned earlier with the Bitcoin reference to CBDCs, mentions here, it's so weird that the macroeconomic environment has impacted Tesla. So Tesla stock is down 41%, but not Ford, they're up 1%, or GM, they're up 8% over the past 6 months. It's almost as if something else happened in mid-October. That's Elon Musk. Wait a second. I just pulled up the wrong file. Okay. I don't have my papers today. I'm on an iPad, so it's not quite my same system. So meanwhile, you've got Mitch McConnell, right? So remember that this is about corruption in the system, right? Corruption in the Senate, corruption in the institutions like the FBI, like the CIA. So this morning, or yesterday, but in referring to the $1.7 trillion omnibus bill, Mitch McConnell, supposedly on the Republican team, right? Supposedly with Trump and all this. But if you look at how he directed spending in the election in Alaska, when he was funding one Republican against another instead of trying to win it against a Democrat, when he was not supporting Kerry Lake and Blake Masters for Senate in Arizona, and everyone questioned, why are you putting money into these other stupid races, right? So here's what Mitch McConnell comes up with today. This is I'm not saying that I don't have to add context, right? This is just right from his mouth. He says that providing all that assistance to Ukraine, right? It'll be $100 billion. Providing the assistance to Ukraine is the number 1 priority for most Republicans. He said that. Now, he might be true because of the PSYOPs. It might be true because of the PSYOPs. But you think he doesn't know it's true because of the PSYOPs? He's sitting in the same seat that LBJ once sat in, right? You don't get a turkey neck like him from being a good guy and going without, right? You get the turkey neck like he had. And we're not fat shamers here. We're not here to make fun of people's looks or anything like that, right? We're not into that. But when you see a guy like Mitch McConnell, right, in the position that he's in with the fleshy skin and the hanging and the sagging, it tells you everything you need to know, right? Physically, there's the French writer Honoré de Balzac, who always tied the affectations and personality of characters to their physical appearance, right? That there was a major symmetry to those things within all the nuances, right? Particularly special looking people, let's say, can have, it's not you're good looking, you're a good person. That's not how Balzac, he's not a famous writer because he used such simple linear thinking, right? He had a lot of nuance and color to that impression. But to a certain extent, just looking at it, you can feel it's true, right? You get a sense of people when you look at them. You can be wrong. I've been wrong a million times. So it's not a foolproof system of sensing and understanding and all that. But often, right, you can see people's vices in the way they look. You can see they come through, right? Habits shine through in physical appearance. So Mitch McConnell here, just out there saying, this is what's going on. Now we know that he's influenced. We know that he has his own priorities. They're not necessarily to make a better world. If he thought about that, he'd speak a lot more about Bitcoin, right? But if you remember, one of the people who is on our side, and he's not a Bitcoiner, but he experienced something very similar to the other people I've mentioned here, like Roger Stone and Donald Trump and Elon Musk, and it's General Michael Flynn. So Flynn was a surrogate of Trump. I forget what role he had in the administration, but if you remember, he was the person for this Russia thing from the very start who got in trouble. He contacted the Russian government during we're in the lame duck December period now because we had the elections in November, and then you don't start work until January. Right? There's a lame duck session. In Trump's lame duck session in 2016, he brought Flynn in, and Flynn reached out to the Russians immediately. And the Mueller people said it was collusion. They were getting their story straight before they took power. You shouldn't do that before you take power. You got to wait till you take power. It was normal stuff, right? So in the end, it ruined Michael Flynn's life, right? They took money. I forget what they said something about they would go after his kid for something. I mean, it was really brutal stuff, right? They went into taxes. They did everything you would imagine someone like LBJ would have done 50 years ago. It was done out in the open to this guy, Michael Flynn. Now, I remember when Michael Flynn basically rolled over, right? He basically rolled over. And my impression at the time was, this is actually interesting because this is a battlefield general who understands tactics, understands warfare, understands when a venue is lost. And I think he could see in that early period it was lost. But what do those people do, right? They move back, they gather their arms, they reposition, they recalibrate, and return to the attack. So Michael Flynn became really effective as the election in 2020 happened and the Mueller report fell apart because he started to look like a victim, right? You could see the corruption after his own trials and everything happened. And he became a really effective communicator. And of course, he had to be sidelined and was taken completely off the field, right? So in the election time after 2020, he was totally on national security advisor is what Daniel says he was. Yeah, national security. I don't know much about the guy other than I know he's a serious military mind. Right? That's all I know. So I'm trying to imagine what a serious military mind does when they're confronted with the 2016 election win and the blowback that came with the Mueller report and the agencies all moving the way they have since then, the way they've coordinated all of this stuff with social media. So when the 2020 elections came around, he was in a great position to help Trump and was really effective as a communicator. And of course, he was sidelined. So he was banned from Twitter, but now he's part of the respawn. So he's back. And what's he doing now that he's back? Well, he wrote a book and it's awesome. The book he wrote is like an art of war, right? Like the Sun Tzu's Art of War, but for now, for the period we're in. And I haven't read it all yet, but someone was sharing a couple of pieces. Oh, dang. It didn't save correctly. Okay, just 1 second, and I'm going to get it out of my pictures here because I want to read them to you. So he, get it here. So Michael Flynn wrote a book about, and this is what it's called, The Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generation Warfare, right? And every Bitcoiner should be studying this stuff. I've only seen a few of them, but it's exactly what we need to learn about. And it's what we talk about here on the show, right? It's all the stuff we talk about here on the show. So here's two pieces of advice he gives. See a cat, paint a tiger. The unseen hand controls the populace by making small, controlled groups appear to be a majority audience of a nation who collectively demand change based on the desire of most people who remain unaware that they are being manipulated. They are not the majority, but have the appearance of the majority because the real majority audience is shadow banned, deplatformed, outright canceled, or swarmed with dissenting programmed bots. Lawyers, big tech, and media react in kind, touting that they are with the people when they support the small groups who have been cloaked as the majority, though they are not. So right away here, remember, this is a guy who fled a battlefield because he understood the odds, which is what you want, right? You don't want your good generals to just run into something full of patriotism and they get their head blown off, right? So here's someone who understood what was going on, took a step back, got back into the field of battle, and then realized things were way worse than he ever thought, and he was sidelined. So what does he do? He creates an actual battle plan that we can all use. And when I hear see a cat, paint a tiger, right? Isn't that perfect for us Bitcoiners? Right? We use that every day because we can't be influenced by these changing perceptions of the fiat world, that we can't be fooled by exaggerations as easily. Right? We can all be fooled by exaggerations, but not as easily. So right away, we have a defense, and it's something we can even use, right? We can even turn it on the enemy in a sense. Because Bitcoin is all around the world, and because we do communicate so quickly and so thoroughly with such dense information through the memetic warfare and all these things, we're way better positioned to confront this paper tiger situation. So right away, we are, as I continue to use as a frame, we're D-Day, right? We are the force that will storm the beach and destroy this thing, right? That's how the history books are going to look at Bitcoiners. That's our role here. And what he is suggesting here, that this is an in to the fight, this see a cat, paint a tiger, we're already on top of that. Here's another one, weaponizing human nature. This is one we talk about a lot on this show. Social conformity and confirmation bias are part of human nature, right? We say that's the operating system on this show, right? We say those things are the operating system. What is the name of that book, Bitcoin Graffiti? It is called The Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generation Warfare. The Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generation Warfare. Michael Flynn. Weaponizing human nature. Social conformity and confirmation bias are part of human nature. Social conformity is a type of social influence involving a change in belief or behavior to fit in with that group. Confirmation bias is the natural tendency to process information by looking for or interpreting information that is consistent with one's existing beliefs. Now, we Bitcoiners do that all the time. They call it an echo chamber. There's nothing wrong with it, right? Because I think it's only a problem when you have the big ego, right? The big ego piece is what makes you cling to stupid ideas longer than you need to. But that doesn't change human nature of wanting to join a group and having social conformity. And Bitcoin has created that culture, right? That's why plebs are such a compliment, right? Pleb is a compliment because it shows you have the low ego, but you are still involved in the community and are willing to do your part, not to seek fame and fortune, just to seek the ability to save your money like a dignified human being, right? All of this cultural stuff strengthens us and protects us against the psyops that are all around. But here's the neat thing. Here's the really neat thing. To frame what's going on, Michael Flynn uses a JFK quote, right? And it's so appropriate, right? So the big game and a few of the players. This is what he says, right? This is a JFK quote. You know, it's all about JFK and LBJ. I mean, it really is. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy. This is, remember, conspiracy theory, as we've talked about on this show, became an issue after he died. The New York Times never published the words conspiracy theory until 1964, and then didn't stop, right? For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned. That's the important part. No expenditure is questioned. No rumor is printed. No secret is revealed. And what we describe a lot, the context, the frame, an easy way to frame what we're going through is World War II edifice that won the war, that was amazing. Even the fiat money that won it, even the initial policies in the 40s before the entropy set in, created ideal circumstances for human beings to live in the world for a brief period, right? The average gas station attendant on a sole income could have a home and kids and provide for all of them. And that was 1950. We hadn't become the big consumers yet. We only spent on the things we needed. They hadn't really managed to turn the American population into consumer bots yet. Now, I understand why they did it, right? To strengthen the military industrial complex in order to demilitarize, right? Make consumers to demilitarize. A very clear choice was being made by Eisenhower and Kennedy. But Kennedy got killed and it didn't stop, right? What happened when Kennedy died? LBJ revs up the war machine, goes to Vietnam, does a false flag, and we have everything we see today with us. And that's what Kennedy mentions in this piece, right? He says it. A highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. That's the World War II battleship. That's the one that kept sailing around the world. All those pieces combined made this thing. And that's what we have to do. We've got to break that apart. That's how we end World War III. We end World War III by truly ending World War II. We never really ended it. We just kept it running. The Cold War, all that shit was just an extension of World War II. It didn't have the same, active, hot battle scenes, but that's not what's necessary. World War III is not hot, active war. It's exactly as Michael Flynn suggests. It's psyops, it's economic warfare. People are dying. There's no doubt there's hot instances, but this isn't lining up an army and marching into Europe and winning, right? It's not that. It's Bitcoiners understanding you can short a nation state's debt and tearing it into the ground and knocking it out. And we got to knock out every coin until we get to the dollar, and then we get a heavyweight bout. And then either we lose or we subordinate the US dollar to being what I think it's going to end up as political money, so that we can still have some policies that directly help the people who are at this point almost beyond. Like, what are we going to do with Taylor Lorenz? What are we going to do with her? We win everything, right? Say we win everything. It's hyper-Bitcoinized world. It's 2027 and we're laughing and it's great and everyone's happy, right? All of us are happy. We got it. All the companies keep Bitcoin on the balance sheet. We're making nuclear reactors. Energy markets are only traded in Bitcoin. We took over, right? BRICS failed. US dollar failed because the BRICS thing couldn't balance it, and energy markets had to go to a neutral place. They come to Bitcoin, we win, right? That's a scenario, a plausible scenario. Chances, we're not here to talk about the chances. Plausible scenario. What do you do with someone like Taylor? Is she going to go? What's she going to do? Is she going to write? No. So we can't. We can't. What are we going to do with people like that, right? You can't let them starve. You can't. There'll be nothing for them. Their reputation's destroyed. It's the same as the people after Nazism when they shaved their heads and paraded them through the streets. There's going to be stuff like that for the people who engaged in psyops knowingly, not the people who were victims of it, like Yoel Roth, who I'm still arguing is a victim, even though I might be wrong. What are you going to do? I think UBI and those things are natural. We won't have a choice. Right? We can't let them die. So we've got to feed them and take care of them. But the cool thing is we're going to get them stuck in an incentive trap, and it'll be funny, kind of like, oh, I want to go on vacation this year. Right? Oh no, I got to eat more bugs to earn my vacation or something crazy like that, right? I don't want this to happen. I'm not arguing for it, right? I want all humans full of dignity. But there is going to be a period of transition where we're dealing with the sludge that came from before, and we got to make sure the sludge is healthier and cleaner, right? We don't have a choice, right? So let me get my stuff back here. So let me go back to my notes. Yeah. So the JFK story and the LBJ story and the Twitter files are all bringing this PSYOP stuff into focus. And you're starting to get people who are able to sort of translate what these politicians are saying now, right? More openly and clearly. You have London Breed, the mayor of San Francisco yesterday, who let out a series of tweets about the conditions of the country, of the city and all that. And this guy, Joe Lonsdale, came out and translated the bureaucraties, translated that old fiat cobweb language, right? And he says, so what he does is he takes our whole Twitter thread and just takes the important items out and then says what they mean. So she calls, the mayor of San Francisco says, the structure of downtown has shifted. He says, translation, dozens of businesses have fled downtown San Francisco because their workers are terrified of being assaulted or worse by criminals and mentally ill homeless people. She says, our 2-year deficit is 20 million next year and 528 million the following year. Translation, we somehow did an even worse job this year than we did last year. FEMA funding has provided significant support for our general fund. Translation, we used emergency money to operate the government, and without a permanent emergency, our city's budget collapsed. London Breed, our business taxes, property taxes, and real estate transfer taxes are below where we projected. Translation, it turns out that when businesses flee our city, they take the money with them. We didn't consider this before we ran them off. A hard look at which programs are delivering results for our residents. Translation, they will preserve all the money for the corrupt homeless-related NGO cartels because they operate political machines that control a large percentage of the votes in San Francisco. We don't know what lies ahead, says London Breed. Translation, she's seen the internal budget projections, and they're even worse than what she's telling us. So it's like this again and again, right? And Glenn Greenwald even joined in about translating this stuff and how you can do it now. So this is the mayor of London saying, Trump is a dangerous far-right politician who has a history of inciting violence. He must not be allowed to use social media or preach hate to further fuel the politics of division. Right? Sadiq Khan telling us we shouldn't divide people because we're assholes. And this is Glenn Greenwald. Western politicians now have an obsession with issuing dictates like this about who can and cannot be allowed to speak online, usually accompanied by, as here, threats of legal compulsion. Anyone who says freedom of speech is vital, but means I oppose freedom of speech. And that's true. So now we're starting to understand that they built an entire system to keep people from complaining about how bad the corruption was. Right? And that's how you end up with people speaking like London Breed, and it makes no sense. It can't make sense. It's crazy, right? You have to live in that environment to make sense of it. You know, one of the things that I, sort of a pre-Bitcoin idea that I had when I was much more involved in politics that I still think is relevant. I use this to kind of explain how far off politics have gotten, but I think it's relevant, which is that because it became so unimportant, politics in America, because we just didn't give a shit in the 70s, 80s, 90s, especially the 90s, did not care, right? No one was divided over politics. The PSYOP capacity was greatly diminished, and it was a good time, right? People were having fun. What I understood from seeing this and seeing political anger, which was real at the time, right? It wasn't the same with the general population. It hadn't really transferred yet to the general population. The anxiety and fighting still happened in DC and in Ottawa, and the antagonism, tribal attitudes and all that. What I discovered was because there was so much money put in the system that it had sort of spun right and wrong and logic into its own realm, right? Because the money was there, the fights were there, only they cared about the fights, not everyone else cared about the fights. So they ended up creating this ball of tension around certain debates, and those spun to be unrecognizable to normal people. They couldn't understand what the fault lines even were, right? And now, and that's what created all this crazy language and the euphemisms and the way to say things without saying them, and all those things. So now where we find ourselves is we finally have the capacity. The historical perspective to look back and see what's gone wrong, when it went wrong, and how far we've fallen. We were sort of too close to it in the 90s. We couldn't really tell if things were good. Come on, the CIA and a president killed a president. Give me a break, right? Never. It was a conspiracy theory. It was crazy. It was for Oliver Stone to think about, and that was it. Make movies and we can all have fun speculating, right? But now we understand that there are no innocents, and our government is not our friend. And Americans lost World War II. America and the LBJs of the world won, right? The Americans were supposed to win. In the 50s, they were winning, but that was taken from them. And it was all given to the industrial war machine. It was all given to the media machine. It was all given to the things that Kennedy predicted would be a problem. And here we are living with the results. So there you go. I wonder if the FBI used Twitter to influence foreign elections. Oh yeah, for sure. We've seen it. U.S. Department of Energy releases update on fusion. China and Finland have also breakthroughs in the past year on fusion energy. Yeah, but these motherfuckers, did you see what the Department of Energy did? I'm going to talk about it tomorrow on the show. I didn't have time to talk about it today because I would do my own show on it. So I'm familiar with their regulatory system for nuclear energy in America, and basically they have never granted permissions for one of these new systems. And a few years ago, we're supposed to streamline the application process for nuclear reactors. So they just released their streamlined process. It's insane. It's a 1,500 page. It's a 1,500 page. 1,500 page guideline that makes the process for applying for nuclear reactors way more complicated than it ever was. So it's corruption, right? It's absolute corruption. So I'm going to do an episode on that. So we'll be talking more about this energy stuff, James, tomorrow probably. Germany invested into solar in the last decade, but didn't invest into the battery tech. This is from James again. The area needed to power entire human civ is less than the size of Vermont. Yeah, the fossil fuel cartel runs the world, which is good, James. Again, that's good for Bitcoin. This is a much easier industry to corrupt than politics. Much easier. It's not hard, actually, right? These are energy folks. They just want to make money, right? They just want to make more money. They like making money off oil, and there's people who will keep making money off oil if the military and everything else falls into place to allow them to do it. But we can pry them loose of the military reins if we do it right. And I think we're going to, right? I think incentive alignment and all those things that Bitcoin offers, and the financing mechanisms they offer to coordinate the construction and build out of nuclear energy or just energy infrastructure, to decentralize it basically, is too powerful for them to resist. So again, the path to Bitcoin for me remains make the energy companies richer and just take them over, right? Just take them over just by making them rich, and then slowly, because look, Bitcoiners are a little more performant, a little smarter. Like everyone who comes and watches this show, I mean, how many days ahead are we than the normal news? We're a little more informed, right? Or days ahead. Each time we're days ahead, right? We've been days ahead for months now. So Bitcoiners involving themselves in energy, right? We really have gathered. So here's the beautiful thing about the way the world works. Self-correcting, I guess you can say. We lost an entire generation to Wall Street of our best and brightest, right? And because it's natural, whenever industry makes the most money, your best and brightest are going to go there. And so we lost a whole generation of our best and brightest to financialization and Wall Street engineering and all those tricks. And basically just all the hot air that came out of the US dollar system. So what that did was arm a bunch of, it created Bitcoiners, because the environment they were able to grow up in that Wall Street thing, had already attracted some of the smartest people. Like, just forget about Arthur Hayes and whatever else for a second, right? Just read the writing. Is there anyone else on Wall Street who can write like that? I don't think so. I don't think there is, right? He is in the top 0.01 of Wall Street. He just is, right? And there's more than that, more than that. So the good news is the smartest people that did go to Wall Street have already gone to Bitcoin. So we just have more horsepower, and that is how we're going to win, right? We're going to win because we have more horsepower. Bitcoin Graffiti says, it sounded I-Chingy what you read before on that Paper Tiger. Yeah, that was the warfare one, right? The Paper Tiger one. I think that was it. Bitcoin offers transparency 10 years or something. Yeah. Let me see. I missed one more quote up here. What is the name of the book? Yeah, that was the 5-Gen Handbook Warfare. Good morning, everyone. Okay, cool. Follow the money. The spouses of elected politicians always seem to find such incredible success in their financial pursuits. Yeah. What's that one? Obama's wife? How much money she's making these days, right? LV99, putting your dick on the table is a real thing, huh? Yeah, no, he did that, guys. That's for real. That's for real. Long Big Johnson. Yeah, I think it might even be where it comes from. I mean, it's pretty well known. But I love kids. Cool. I have my kids. I'll let them do a guest appearance sometime. I have the cutest kids in the world. I'm really lucky. Doomberg peeking Nolan's show notes. Yeah, it could be. We were ahead. Afternoon, I guess. Smithereen 5 is far away. Yeah, but LV, yeah, public service with an S, Daniel says. Funny. So funny. Let me see. U.S. Department. Yeah, Fusion. Pound the like button, guys. Give me the subscribe. Most of you are subscribers, though. You know, I get to see some of the data stuff. It's pretty neat. Everyone who watches the show watches all of it. So I have like really high numbers on hours watched. Most of my viewers are subscribers. So those are like sort of unique things when you see long videos like this on YouTube. So that's very positive, right? We're good. All right, guys, that's all I got for today. What were you talking about there, Bitcoin Graffiti? 10 years or something? That was funny. I'm just curious. I don't remember what I said. I like to take note of things that are funny so that I can copy them again. I'll wait for you to answer that. Oh, that we were, 10 years or something. That we were ahead of the news. Yeah. Well, I don't know about 10 years, but we're ahead days pretty often, right? We are. I mean, that's I think the value of coming together every morning like this is that if you do it every morning, you can stay ahead and you can see things before they happen, kind of, and anticipate them. You get a better feeling, I guess you can say, about what's coming in the news. And it's really one of the reasons why I love doing this show, because it helps me make predictions, test if they were correct, so that I knew if I had it right in the first place. And we're staying on track by meeting up every morning. That's what the consistency is all about, right? Staying on track. All right, team. See you tomorrow. Probably on nuclear energy. We'll see. Unless crazy stuff happens. I'd already made a note of what I was doing tomorrow when I saw that nuclear stuff.